Is it wickedness? Is it weakness?
Arcane is very much a product of its time, a modern-day video game adaptation blending 3D modeling with 2D details with an all-inclusive cast. It has tropes and archetypes up the ass, and the very premise of the show, a civilization that's neglected by its richer or more powerful counterpart, is so familiar I don't feel the need to detail it to you. Not that it ever was a bad thing, it's fine for a show to be a culmination of decades upon decades of niche and cliche storytelling, and in Arcane's case, it did all of these things so well. How it tackled mental health, class disparity, our dreams and whether or not we're doomed for being too ambitious, the rightful anger of a disparaged people. Arcane was as methodical as it could be, especially with such heavy themes. It was always careful with the way it portrayed these topics and ideas. There's just a few problems. Arcane, aside from obvious exceptions, was written by white queer people who spent their days seemingly not learning about the vast and complicated political sphere around them, but instead spent their time debating online as to which ships they thought were superior to the other, as they sipped their hug fruit barrels watching the latest episode of The Legend of Korra. I know all of this seems a bit forward, but if you look at all of the shows that inspired the very people who are writing Arcane, it's honestly no wonder something went wrong. And yes, I am keeping the comments on.
Is it wickedness?
I don't want to talk about Avatar. I don't think I need to explain why Avatar is good. It's just that Avatar is kind of the original sin when you think about it. Avatar was special in that it was one of the first big animated shows to have its release coincide with the boom of the internet. Oh boy, where do I even start? Like, I wasn't around when the Zutara shippers were running their musk around the presence of actual upstanding citizens, but to say their lineage hasn't tainted the pot of discourse would be a lie. Look, there's nothing wrong with shipping Zutara, hell, even some of the writers do. But there's some very serious implications with shipping the son of a colonizer with a woman who's been colonized. That's not to say they don't have some of the best moments of the show when they're together, but in order to contend with why this pairing works, you have to contend with the context this pairing would exist in, if you're arguing it would have been better than what we got anyway. Cause that's not why people ship them. I'm gonna tune you guys into a little secret. Zuko's conventionally attractive. I presume when people were younger and they saw this emo, scarred, secret boy scout who's having a pre-life crisis, that changed their brain chemistry a little bit. Someone who makes you think I can fix him while also making it hard to want to. Which begs the question, when you ship Zutara, do you ship it because you like the characters or want to see yourselves with one of them? Certain stories are often criticized for being a male power fantasy, a way for pathetic and somewhat uninteresting men to see themselves in a character who has all of the power, all of the girls, but none of the things that would earn it. And while this criticism is definitely valid in a lot of anime, movies, etc., that doesn't mean that it only extends to one gender. Now, for the centuries that women in real life and in fiction have been subjugated, it is completely fair to not only want, but to obsessively defend those certain characters that make you feel strong. But
I'm with Asami.
Yeah, but when you're with her, you're thinking about me, aren't you?
there's gotta be a line somewhere, right? Like, I feel bad because the discourse around The Legend of Korra has been completely hijacked by honest-to-God bigots who are only offended that the next avatar is a brown woman. And ever since then, those cartoons, well, they're just too damn woke. But at the same time, I can't shake the feeling that Korra doesn't really make it any easy to defend her. How do I put this? She would be the main character of Black Twitter? Legend of Korra is the reason I hate love triangles. While most of them are annoying because we know who the endgame is and we're just wasting our time trying to get there, LOK's is even more insidious because none of these characters come close to having as good of a relationship that the original Team Avatar had. On their own, they're boring, but together they're even more hollow. It appears the writers wanted to show the complex emotions and hormones of being a teenager with the love triangles of The Legend of Korra. But firstly, this combined with Korra generally just being an asshole to everyone around her and her irresponsibility as an avatar makes her character even harder to watch. However, even that would be fine if it wasn't implied that this iteration of Team Avatar will be as long-lasting of friends as the original gang were. That would be like trying to tell me the cast of Euphoria get a content house together after high school or something. You don't make out with the entire friend group and then everything is just cool afterwards. But as I alluded to earlier, no one really seems to care about that because again, Korra as a character fulfills a female fantasy. She's strong, she's assertive, and gets to tongue whoever she wants. This is again why I bring up these two shows in the first place. People don't really care about the story, how good or bad the characters are. They only care about the ability to insert themselves into whatever powerful role a character has, or inversely, want to see themselves with a powerful character. Which, by the way, there's nothing wrong with that inherently. Escapism is why we entertain fiction. But as we'll see later, this attitude starts to pollute the minds and behaviors of certain susceptible internet goers. Steven Universe has gotten pile-drived by half of the internet, some more rationally than others obviously, but let it be known that this show kind of deserves all of it, as the lesson Steven Universe got from its anime influences, Yuri likenesses, and melodramatic cartoon forefathers ended up making it so every character on this show is almost astoundingly unlikable, and don't worry, the characters themselves agree with me, as there's a sense of unabashed insecurity reeking from the people in Beach City. Not because they have misplaced insecurities caused by trauma, neglect, etc., although they certainly do, but whether it is Pearl being so insecure about her own strength that she has to take advantage of someone else without their consent to feel stronger. Yeah, remember that episode? Lapis hating how she's been used only to then use her only friend, the villains hating themselves for being intergalactic colonizers, or the main character hating himself for being way too sensitive and emotional to the detriment of everyone in the universe. Everyone in this show rightfully knows they're terrible people. If you want the best example of this, look no further than Rose Quartz. She's honest to God just a gooner who wanted to goon in peace, but her dictatorship got in the way. I'm not kidding, that's what her character is. Like yeah, she can eventually learn the sanctity of the earth and how beautiful it was, but let's not forget the woman had a human zoo, and still viewed humans as playthings when she met Greg. Ironically enough, she's just like the fans and the writers of the show, horny to a fault, while being unaware of the consequences of her flesh. This show isn't well constructed enough to handle the deep and messy things these characters go through. So in the end, these characters just make each other miserable almost for the sake of it. And because of that, now the toxic shippers have a show that is not only about, well, toxic shipping, i.e. immature romances, but now their behavior is validated as they're given characters they can relate to. If The Legend of Korra was a lesson in how romance could destroy the central character in her friend group when not handled well, Steven Universe is a lesson in how romance, when it's the primary focus of a show, can make the entire cast or at least certain characters look pretty shitty if written irresponsibly. Yes, in case anyone, Amanda, needed to know, not every action can or should be justified for the sake of true love. Especially if writing that love involves neglecting a victim of PTSD, or the gassing of a city. Like damn, you two really let her cook, huh? Steven Universe was at least more bearable for a while because it had strong ties to the Gravity Falls fandom, and so the theorizing was really fun. But it also had ties to other destructive fanbases like Star vs. The Forces of Evil, She-Ra, and and Voltron. Thankfully, as all of these series come to a close, the fans should die along with it, right?
Why did I end up having to chase after someone who was always so far behind me? You got so much better, and I destroyed All Might! Why did a damn small fry like you get strong?
White queer people have ruined fandom spaces. Now, normally I don't want to be that crass. Anyone from anywhere and any race, any sexuality can like what they like, and adore what speaks to them. But frankly, I have been dancing around the subject for the entire video, and MHA's fanbase unfortunately takes everything I've talked about to a whole new extreme that I can't ignore for much longer. MHA is not just a show that borders the line between shonen influences and Western graphic novel plagiarism. Deep down, it's a story that seeks to critique society and prejudice that is systemic, individuality that is squeezed out of a group of people the moment they try to be themselves. MHA wanted to talk about how much it sucks to be part of a marginalized group, and how society as a whole should improve the conditions of those marginalized people if it intends on doing anything as glamorous as altruism. The thing is, it failed, like miserably. By trying to be the most progressive a mainstream shonen has ever been, it accidentally makes some pretty bad decisions with its characters who have already suffered at the hands of oppression, and probably shouldn't continue to suffer as they continue to suffer. And the problem is, trying to talk about that in a space full of people who don't know what discrimination is truly like, who have devoted their lives to not being aware of the cultures around them, but instead people who choose to obsess over the fiction and ships they like, is like trying to explain the Sonic team why they keep losing game awards. Like, I don't know guys, have you tried animating your cutscenes? I'm not saying white people, especially white queer people, can never truly understand oppression. I mean, trans people exist. But the existence of passing amongst communities is common, and the idea of privilege is prevalent for a reason. So trying to talk about why people who are subjugated because they look different shouldn't just smile and be nice in response, or how characters who are clear allegories for people who aren't able-bodied or cishet shouldn't constantly be the butt of the plot via dying or getting cut, or how I'm pretty sure all of the women in MHA only exist to fill up the jar next to Horikoshi's desk, is really difficult because, simply put, white queer people in fandom spaces usually don't care about the story and rather are just really horny all the time. And to be even more honest, this behavior isn't only reserved to white queer people, is it? The CIA have somehow managed to mind control black people with Deku of all things. But even if some of you did understand, it would be a lot easier to take the conversation around this series more seriously if the tone wasn't so volatile towards those of a more negative opinion. That is to say, talking about discrimination failures in fiction would be a lot easier to do if people who were only in it for the ships weren't so insistent on those failures not existing. This, for once, isn't Horikoshi's fault, but man does this series have something for everyone. Bully reformation, polar opposite pairings, complementary pairings, young shy love, enemy ships, tragedy ships, don't think about it for too long ships. God, this show is just a big old tag list, isn't it? And admittedly, some of the fan works, whether it be fan comics or fan fiction, make engaging with MHA even more fun. Unfortunately, the toxicity of the previous two fan bases, and a little bit of Voltron too, reared its ugly heads, and as a result, there were almost constant civil wars. And when that got boring, those same antics started popping up over in the Jujutsu Kaisen fanbase as well. Thank God they didn't touch Black Clover. The trajectory of my life and reputation in the fanbase changed because of a Baku Deku crying space. Whether it was people who shipped Bakugo and Deku together fighting with people about how Bakugo hit Deku affectionately or something, or Deku and Ochako shippers literally ignoring most of the story just so that they can keep their cute Ochako profile pictures, things got really toxic, to the point where the voice actor for Deku in the dub doesn't even want to be asked shipping questions anymore. I mean, nothing will ever beat the Voltron crew getting death threats, although if Hori had an active Twitter, Lord knows his mentions would be hot. And I'd be right there with you, cause that man serves zero purpose. Anyways, what sucks is that, like, it was all for nothing. Because of MHA's deteriorating writing quality, no one really won because every character was reduced to a fraction of who they used to be, with none of the depth they possessed earlier in the story. I.e., every dynamic in the show is superficial because the story would rather focus on the idea of community as a whole rather than the relationships or even friendships those communities have birthed over the course of the narrative. Ochako has practically ignored Deku for almost a decade because I guess she was busy on certain business trips. And when Deku actually gains the drive to seemingly ask her out, I think, it's only made possible because a dead minority told Ochako that she wants her to be happy. Oh god, I wonder if that's foreshadowing. Bakugo spent most of his life trying to be better for one specific person, trying to accommodate that one specific person, only to be rejected by that one specific person because, I don't know, I guess the quirkless bum somehow has better things to do, like taxes or jury duty. This is a real story, written by a person that I'm assuming graduated college. And remember guys, no matter how bad this ending is, you are completely incapable of doing any better. I digress though. Again, most people don't want to think about this stuff, because as long as they can imagine themselves getting swept away by Kanchan, the purpose of the story has been fulfilled. Their attachment to the series was superficial, just being tied to the imaginary chemistry between characters that they just made up in their heads. Which is fine, as a sort of escapism, but the moment that attachment transforms into tantrums, because people walked away from your favorite series, being unsatisfied for reasons you deem unfathomable, well, then we have a problem, don't we? Because those reasons aren't unfathomable. Your DNA just makes you incapable of understanding them. The problem with cartoons and anime, or at least this generation of them, is that, frankly, we're being raised on the wrong ones. Instead of being raised on Naruto, Dragon Ball, Samurai Jack, Avatar, we're raised on... And what's worse is that people who grew up with such satanic propaganda are the same people who are now writing TV shows. I have to keep reiterating that I don't think all queer white people are incompetent when it comes to exploring or identifying discrimination, because shows like Arcane make it very hard to say that statement with a straight face, as seemingly every character who opposes the system in some way either die and Jinx, get converted by the capitalism of Piltover like Vi, or get treated like they're purely madmen with no ounce of humanity left in their being. Or in Isha's case, you also die. The amount of victims in this show is astounding. Zaun didn't choose to be left alone, deserted like they were, and yet the people on the upside constantly reap the benefit of their suffering. Jinx embodies that. She's someone who ultimately feels like a burden, who just wants to exist as herself while also wanting others to validate her. How she feels, the neglect she honors, is emblematic of how her people also feel. And the one person who could salvage any of this is her sister. And what does she do instead? Vi has chosen the upside over her own people time and time again, and maybe at one point it was valid because her people were igniting the cycle of violence, but it doesn't help that when she chooses the upside, or specifically Kate, over her own people, the story constantly gives us reasons as to why this is wrong. And let's not forget, the entire conflict of the show is entirely her fault. In layman's terms, the simple thought of a revolution, especially concerning what Jinx means as a symbol, is dropped and discarded because somebody in the damn studio wants to goon to lesbian sex. Look, I'm not saying I know these writers' intentions or personalities for a fact, just like I will probably never know for certain what happened in that damn cafe. Ugh. This is just what I've surmised. When it looks like a duck who's watched way too many melodramatic, mean-spirited, irresponsible shows with worrying politics, then I think we should call it a duck, people. That's why looking at the inspiration for certain pieces of fiction is so important. After all, we are a combination of what we love. And if what we love, what we've indulged in for years, is a vicious cycle of internet culture, toxic behavior over imaginary romances, cultivated by frankly insensitive, immature attempts at character study at best, and harmful hit pieces aimed at those progressive leaning at worst, that are by the way disastrously put together just for the sake of representing certain groups, then it's no wonder why Arcane was doomed to fail from the start. Also, yes, I'm aware that it's ironic I'm a Sonic fan. F***ing sue me!